Why hello there, and welcome back to Some Weirdo on the Internet Reviews Obscure Role-Playing Games. Now, with green screen. Mermaids After the End was released in 2020 by Ushibean Productions and is a post-apocalyptic transhumanist oceanic tabletop role-playing game. A bunch of things that don't really seem like they should go together, but they kinda do. So this game is fairly setting heavy for only being like 60 pages long, and the short version of it is a comet hit the Earth, melting the ice caps and turning the Earth into some kind of water world. With all the surviving humans kind of clustered together now on all the remaining bits of land, and, time goes on, technology advances, eventually they start putting brains into robot bodies, and then someone figures out that since almost the entire surface of the Earth is covered with water, maybe they should put their brains into aquatic robot bodies. And there we have it, post-apocalyptic transhumanist mermaids diving down to the sunken ruins of human society in search of treasure and adventure. The two often go together. So overall, it is a good blending of the themes of post-apocalypse, transhumanist, and mermaids, which apparently the whole thing started with those three random prompts, and, they smushed them together pretty good. There is a little bit of overly simplistic transhumanist idealism in there that I'm not particularly fond of, mainly the idea that putting our brains into robot bodies will immediately remove all prejudices and biases based around our bodies, because they will be robot bodies. And honestly, it feels a bit like bringing up the topic just to say that it isn't a topic in the game. But still, a +1 for setting. I'm honestly kind of indifferent towards it personally, but they did a good job of blending all of the themes together and then fleshing them out well. Character creation is a bit interesting. We have 3 categories of character traits and 3 priority levels for each, and select one of each priority level. First, we have available frames, and let's take that at priority A, which gives us access to all of the standard frames, and we will select the Otohime frame. Our frame sets our strength, body, dexterity, and armor values. Also, we get hit points equal to 3 times our body, and some other stuff that I will get to later. Next, we have non-derived attribute points, and let's take that at priority C, which gives us 10 points to distribute between our reflex, intelligence, and charisma, which all start at 1, and there we go, points distributed. And finally, skill points, and all that's left is priority B. We have 5 groups of skills which all start at 1, and we assign one of the values to each of the groups, and then distribute the points. The Otohime frame also gives us a +1 bonus to Charisma, Leadership, and Persuasion, as well as the ability to hack other frames. Then we choose a talent and 3 keystones, and this character is done. And that is it, and there are some things here that I definitely like. Specifically, having your character's attributes and abilities split between basically your mind and your frame is a neat way of dealing with the whole human mind in a robot body idea, because you actually can switch your bodies fairly easily as long as you have access to a 3D printer and the ocean internet. And when doing so, you retain all of your mental abilities but get a whole new set of physical abilities, which is what would happen if you transferred your mind into a different robot body. I also like the system of prioritizing your frame options, attributes, and skills, so you can decide if you want better frames, better skills, or better attributes. Although personally I would have liked to have seen the Otohime frame as a B-tier option, because it is described as being a socially focused frame, and someone who's playing a socially focused character is going to want to prioritize skills or attributes, and they are not going to want access to the other advanced frames, which are better for things like combat. However, they do still get a 4 out of 6 for character creation. There isn't a lot of stuff here that's really unique or interesting, but the stuff that is unique and interesting is good and does a very good job keeping with the themes of the game. So the basic mechanics here are when a character wants to do a thing, you roll a number of d12s equal to a relevant attribute and get one success for each die that comes up equal to or less than the relevant skill. And then succeed overall if your total number of successes is equal to or greater than the difficulty level, which can range from 0 to 6. But now, let's look at combat. Alright, so let's say that while out exploring the murky depths, we run afoul a cyber shark, and combat commences. The shark attacks immediately, as is their way, so we roll our dexterity versus fisticuffs, and the shark rolls an abstract attribute versus skill. A melee combat check is difficulty 1 for some reason, and success goes to the character with the most successes above the difficulty. So let's get rid of the unsuccessful dice, and the shark has 3 successes versus our 2, which, after removing 1 for the difficulty, a wholly unnecessary step, makes it 2 versus our 1. So the shark wins and deals 7 damage, which our 1 point of armor reduces to 6. Unfortunately, taking 6 or more damage from a single attack results in an injury, which means we are incapacitated for the remainder of the encounter. Fortunately though, an injured character cannot be targeted by attacks, so I guess the shark just gets bored and leaves. So overall, I like the basic mechanics here, having a dice pool system where your number of dice and target number are determined by your attributes and skills. It is kind of a neat way to handle that whole situation and not have a static target number. However, things do get a little wonky after that. For example, a character's strength has no impact on combat, which in itself is not an issue. However, the higher strength frames, the ones that are described as being better at combat, are actually the worst at melee combat because they have low dexterity scores. And just for example, let's compare the Skila frame, which is specified as being favored by white-collar technicians and other laborers, to the Mershark frame, which is noted for its ability to both take a punch and dish one out. Both frames have the same number of hit points and the same armor value, but the Skila frame, which, remember, is favored by white-collar technicians and laborers, rolls 4 more dice when making a melee attack. The Mershark has 2 more points of strength, but that doesn't really matter because strength is not factored into attacks or damage. Honestly, it feels like strength was supposed to have some impact on combat, and the frames were designed with that in mind, but then it was changed at some point, and the frame stats were not. Also, the whole incapacitated with 6 damage thing makes one-hit KOs inconveniently probable, and the whole thing with not being able to target an incapacitated creature is just a little weird. Also, there's this whole system of metacurrency, which is a pool of drive points for the players and risk points for the GM, which you get for doing various things and then can spend also on various things like extra dice, rerolls, extra damage, ignoring armor, etc. And it is the momentum and threat system from Star Trek Adventures, a game which I'm not really all that familiar with, just like barely enough to have recognized that this was from that game, so I did look over the rules to that, and there is a moderate amount of Star Trek Adventures in this game. I can't say exactly how much, but it's a moderate amount. So a 2 out of 6 for mechanics. There are some good ideas here, but also a distinctive feeling of needing to include mechanics because they're in another game that you like, without considering if they really work in the game that you are designing. So there is not a lot of stuff in this game. There are 3 adventures, which is good, and 3 additional advanced frames that you can gain access to later in play. However, I really would have liked more frames, as that is one of the most distinctive aspects of this game, especially considering that Rusalka and Swordfish frames are mentioned as something that an enemy might have, but do not have any stats or even a description of. Also, there are only 3 described weapons, but that's not a huge deal because the weapons system is kind of abstract. However, I am less forgiving about the fact that there are only 4 example enemies given, with the only instruction for making other enemies being, look at these 4 examples. So a -1 for content. It is very minimal, like, not to the point of being unplayable, but to the point of being very inconvenient. So overall, the book is written okay. There are, of course, things that could have been explained better, and some things that just aren't covered at all. Like, the description of the Scylla frame has no explanation for, or even mention of, the wolf heads situated around the mid-thigh area for some reason. And yes, obviously the Scylla frame has wolf heads because the popular depiction of Scylla has wolf heads around the waist, not the mid-thigh, but there are wolf heads. However, when you are introducing something into, say, a role-playing game, especially something with a particularly noteworthy aspect, you might want to, say, make note of it in some way instead of just being, this is a thing I like, so I'm putting it in the game without any reasoning or explanation. There is, however, something I actually really like in the writing. There's this whole mysterious thing going on with the moon, and is kind of like woven throughout the book in these little like broken transmissions, and that is done well and actually explained at the end. That's the important part. I hate when people try to put mysteries in role-playing games without explaining them, because the game master needs to know the solution to the mystery to be able to, do anything with it. The layout looks okay. There was some effort put into it, but of course the page breaks are awful, and the only real art is the illustrations of the frames. However, I do have an issue with those illustrations in that they are a little too sexy. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against the sexy art, but it has its place, and these are very much Monster Girl pinups with very specific design elements which suggest that they were designed with fuckability in mind. And this just doesn't really seem like the place for that kind of thing. So no adjustment for writing, the good and the bad just kind of cancel each other out, and 3 out of 6 for presentation. Once again, the good and the bad just kind of cancel each other out. And that was Mermaids After the End. Another one of those games that I really wanted to be good, but it just wasn't. Like, I started getting into it, there were great ideas, but then it just all kind of fell apart. And there are interesting, unique things in this game, that's the thing. It could have been a good game if it were designed from the ground up, based around those unique concepts, instead of just taking them and stuffing them into the shell of another system with some swapped out mechanics. But I guess we'll never know what could have been. Unless they make a 2nd edition or something, which, isn't exactly an uncommon thing to happen. And thank you for watching, and putting up with the probably not good use of the green screen, which I am still working on. With an extra special thanks to my Flail Snail level patrons, Samuel Gorsick, Randy Mulholland, and SC Woolridge. If you'd like to be cool like them, check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. And if you don't want to do that, that is fine too. I appreciate your viewership either way. But you can still hit all of the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos. I'm sure these are lovely videos that you will enjoy. And I will see you next time.